I will explain how idols are remunerated by their corporations and which structural factors determine this process. After this video, you will be able, drawing on the basis of utterances or anecdote indications made by idols themselves, to approximately estimate the composition of their remuneration. This video is not about the levels of remuneration. It concerns the payment schedule and the calculation of financial compensation. How much idols earn on average will be addressed in a separate video, where it will be economically evaluated in terms of fairness, with the central point being surplus value extraction, or to be more precise, deterministic surplus value extraction. In another video as well, I will also examine the debts incurred during the training period, which are often legitimized via the BEP, the break-even point. While these costs are important, they relate only tangentially to the structure of remuneration, with their full discussion reserved for a separate video. The primary focus today is to understand the remuneration system and lay the groundwork before we delve deeper into economic evaluations and the relationships linking value extraction, expenditures, and revenue inflow, thereby allowing us to discern the deterministic insight. Remuneration systems can be categorized as follows. Each of these systems can be combined and mixed. And, of course, there are further forms of remuneration if we look more specifically. We will categorize the substitutes later. For now, I want to set aside the last two, as they are largely irrelevant in scale and not pertinent to the main question. They are hardly primary forms of remuneration, and especially in K-pop is the dimension of their systemically relevance manifests as ontologically negligible. Therefore, we will focus on the first three systems and their subcomponents. Fixed compensation includes a set salary, such as monthly or annual pay, hourly wages, daily rates, or flat fees. Variable remuneration includes revenue or profit-based compensation, such as commissions, alongside other forms of performance-based pay, exempli gratia, piece rate pay. As noted, there are also hybrid systems, and the first two can be combined quite effectively. Participation-based remuneration includes equity, for example, dividends or stock shares.
As in any industry, the method of remuneration varies depending on what makes the most sense. There are also cases where more than one option is equally suitable. For instance, a monthly salary and an annual salary can be equivalent. In such cases, what matters more is how the individual prefers to be paid. But this is just one example. What can already be ruled out are hourly wages and daily rates, as these make little sense for idols.
For musicians and artists, the amount of time invested is largely irrelevant. What matters for the companies is the quantifiable returns. Therefore, in terms of fixed remuneration, almost exclusively flat fees are used. Commissions, on the other hand, are truly interesting. Unlike standard revenue or profit distribution arrangements, the revenue or profit attributed to an idol rarely corresponds directly to the company's overall revenue or profit. A rare example of a conventional revenue or profit-based commission would be Dreamcatcher in their company Dreamcatcher Company, where Dreamcatcher are the only group and likely will remain so. In most companies, multiple groups exist, and their commissions are structured proportionally, either according to specific revenue or profit sources, such as albums, tours, and merchandising, or calculated in relation to the group's so-called division of overall revenue or profit. Cases of general revenue or profit-based commissions at a music label are highly unusual, and if they exist at all, would likely apply only to founding members. But even from a non-progressive neoliberal perspective, such general commissions would still be considered highly unfair. Share remuneration schemes include stocks, dividends, or equity shares. In the K-pop industry, this occurs practically only in joint stock corporations, and even there, it remains exceedingly rare. In non-stock-based companies, participation is normally absent. I mention it here for the sake of completeness. Such participations can carry a speculative value, and if certain thresholds are surpassed, they may yield tax advantages. Thus, they are usually reserved for founding members or truly exceptional cases. Overall, however, this form of remuneration remains uncommon. With this, we have essentially covered the main types of remuneration. Before moving on, I want to briefly address a special case. I will not delve into the entire Loona issue here. That would merit a separate video on its own. But their example shows something unusual. On the one hand, there was a commission split between company and group. Unusually, the members also bore part of the cost risk,
while BBC was ostensibly responsible for the provisioning of core investments.
There were instances where costs were left unaddressed. creating external liabilities and financial strain for the group. This partial cost responsibility is highly atypical, and in some cases even detrimental, as it could affect both the group's financial stability and their public image. Which costs were covered and which were not must ultimately be determined by the courts.
What is clear is that BBC's management of expenses created financial burdens and external liabilities for the group. While we cannot specify which costs, it is evident that this situation caused not only indirect harm, but also exposed the members to obligations that normally would not fall on them, but also induced situations where the group was left partially responsible for certain expenses, including transport or visagists and other essential support typically provided by the company. As mentioned, we won't go into Loona's situation in detail today. That would be reserved for a separate analysis. When a remuneration model exists where those being remunerated take on cost responsibilities within their own production cycle to generate profit, then it is more than customary for them to also receive the larger share of profit or revenue, not as in the case of Loona and BlackBerry. And this holds true not only from a progressive economic perspective, but even under conservative or neoliberal economic convention. So, with all these variations in mind, the natural question remains, which remuneration model is actually the most common?
The predominant mode of remuneration is, in all likelihood, variable remuneration. Some companies may implement a hybrid model that combines fixed lump sum payments with variable elements, thereby securing a basic income floor. However, in other companies, here is Modhouse being a salient example, remuneration is probably predominantly in variable form, because the company Modhouse does cover living expenses, albeit seemingly under rather precarious conditions. The primary reason why variable remuneration predominates, aside from the fact that several sources confirm this, lies in the substantial fixed costs of the break-even point, which are the debts idols incurred during their training period. As I have indicated, both the training period itself and the indebtedness it produces, as well as the question of the fairness of remuneration in general, will be treated in a separate video. From the standpoint of the corporations, the most rational arrangement is to impose a variable remuneration structure, or at minimum, a hybrid model of a fixed baseline for subsistence combined with variable remuneration. The rhythm of payment cannot be definitively established. In groups such as SSS, one can infer that payments are made on an annual basis, yet monthly remuneration appears equally common for K-pop groups. Establishing the precise rhythm would require statistical verification. Given that remuneration is typically determined by profit allocation within the group, it is reasonable to conclude that an annual or quarterly payment cycle represents the most plausible structure in practice. This video is intended primarily to provide you with a sense of how the system operates and which forms of payment are conventionally applied, while also highlighting that idol compensation diverges fundamentally from time-based wages. It serves merely as a conceptual foundation before I move on to the next videos, where I will examine the actual quantum of earnings, situate these structures within an economic framework, critically evaluate them, and explain to you the deterministic surplus value extraction.